I came on here with a very clear and distinct idea of what I wanted to speak about. It's recently come to my attention that we are closing out a 9-year karmic cycle that started in 2016. And when I think back to me and where I was and my life in 2016, and that this is the end of a cycle, it speaks to fighting a war that I didn't know I was in, but everybody else knew I was in. And when I initially realized that there was some sort of conflict, I dismissed it as minuscule because it had been a recurring theme from my childhood. And the only difference with the one in 2016 is that it was on a public platform and it garnered lots of attention, including my own. And light has been shed in the regard that when I dealt with the same issue privately prior to seeing that post in 2016, the way that I reacted was very different from how I've, been reacting lately to issues that affect me, simply because time goes and people grow and they realize that they cannot keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And I think looking back on it now, because this had been an ongoing thing in my life, the expectation was that my reaction would be such that it was predictable. It was almost like predictive text. If I do this and if I say this and if I poke you in this way, then this is going to be the reaction. I only learned this recently though, because like I said, initially I just found it I dismissed it because I was like, this is weird and it's minuscule to me, because if there is an issue and if there truly is an issue that needs to be addressed, then it will be in a manner that doesn't garner public attention. It doesn't garner a crowd. It doesn't require a crowd. And because that was the route that was not taken, I just didn't take it that seriously in that regard until years went by. And in these years going by, I'm literally just living my life, working on my career as a freelance writer, raising my son as a single mom, and really not even really bothered by interpersonal relationships or dynamics, just really focused on my own mental health and my growth in the career field that I had chosen, and most importantly in raising my son. So I really didn't have time for perpetual outside noise that felt like it was at a distance until it started becoming so pervasive it was hard to ignore. And in deducing the meaning of all of this, man, the research that I did, thank you, Google. Thank you, YouTube, particularly, not even Google, but thank you, YouTube, for the school of YouTube, guys, the University of YouTube. Hey, that is yeah, a thing and a half, because the information that I got pertaining to the situation that I was in was so helpful and so immediate. It was like connecting dots immediately without having to spend months ruminating and trying to place dots where I thought they belonged. The answers were literally being told to me through people who had shared, experiences that I had been through, shared trauma, shared experiences, shared whatever the case might be. And in this case, it was trauma and narcissistic recovery, and being able to place understanding and meaning with the vocabulary to certain patterns of behavior that I'd picked up on. Your saving grace. And in so doing, I'm always of the opinion that for me to be at peace with something, I need to understand it. If I can deduce it to an understanding of why it happened the way it did, why it involved the scale of, scalability that it included, then I'm able to make peace with it because I've got the answers that I need. And going onto YouTube was really helpful in that way. I was able to deduce certain things without attaching emotion to them. Like I said, the healing part had already been taken care of prior, but I was able to fall apart in peace regarding other things happening in my life and that I hadn't addressed before. And this was really the time where I was able to do that. And in pinning everything together in my journey to reaching the conclusions that I did this year, hey, in 2025, 9 years, don't forget, in thinking back on those dynamics this year, it made so much sense why I noticed the shifts. I noticed the body language that I did. And I was finally able to make sense of it. And in making sense of it, it led me to this year, 2025, where I finally had the time. You know, when you have beef with someone and you're in the cut and you're scoping the scene, the last thing you want the person you are beefing with is to have time. In 2025, I had time. I had questions that needed answers. I was prepared to handle those answers emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally. And I asked the right questions about cycles, about loops, about behaviors that were persistent. Behaviors that were persistent, that went unchecked. Because in this 9-year scope, in my attempt to find out more about certain behaviors and patterns, I was gaslit. I was dismissed to the point where I studied my own attachment style and came to the conclusion that I was dismissive, avoidant, dismissive, avoidant. And I didn't want to be that way anymore because I'm one hell of a communicator, because I seek understanding so much. Like, it has to be succinct, it has to make sense, it has to be clear to me for me to understand and therefore be able to communicate in a way that is understandable, because I hate being misunderstood. This is why we are where we are as far as my communication style and skills, which were really developed from feeling misunderstood and misheard, or just misaligned with what I was actually trying to convey, and the response that I got in conveying what I was trying to convey. All of this vocabulary, the way that I express myself, the tonality, the timing, the respect, were things that I had to really take into consideration in wanting to no longer be misunderstood in my communication and getting dismissive responses back. Because then it led me to see that it's not how I'm communicating that's the problem. It's the fact that I am. So this year, in asking the right questions, it helped me to come to an understanding of why things were the way they were. And once you begin to unpack one layer, and you unpack the next, and it's not me. Let's make that clear. I took this all to God. I said, Lord, what is this? And he said, I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you finally asked. Okay, this is what this is. And I said, oh. And I carried on asking questions, and my scope for understanding grew, and my intelligence grew, and my ability to respond to conflict grew, because I've also always wanted to be the type of person who's able to handle conflict without causing a scene or being quote unquote attention seeking. I didn't want to give people the ability or the leeway to attach a meaning that wasn't true to how I handled the main conflict I had been dealing with in 2016, that I really ignored until it got to a point where it affected my life in so many different ways. It was hard to, in asking one question, it led me to a slew of different answers, but they all circled back to this particular thing that started publicly in 2016 but realistically all my life, since 8 years old. And the hope was that in me one day, realizing all these things that had been happening around me, the hope was that I would react the way that I reacted when I was a teenager, which was with like having an outburst or being emotional rather, and then being labeled, right? I realized that that was the hope. The people who did this, who insinuated certain things about me that were not true, who, spread lies and gossip and rumors, and obviously it's going to come back to me at some point. And by the time it did, the hope was that I was still stuck in that childhood trauma, which was not the case at all. Because from 2016 to 2025, there were so many significant turning points with regards to my mental health and my emotional well-being. Like I mentioned, I was a freelance writer and I was a single mother. I'm not trying to have additional problems in my life, but by not knowing how to control my emotions and reactions to interpersonal relational dynamics, and because I lack conflict resolution skills. And if I can bring something to an understanding for myself, I'm able to address it succinctly if it needs to be addressed. And this certainly did, because it got to a point where I could no longer not advocate for myself. I could no longer not address the elephant in my room that came for my character